week's episode of Star Wars Rebels, the Ghost Crew discover an abandoned Imperial cargo ship, which is filled to the brim with proton bombs, as well as some lavish treasure, which just so happens to signal the return of everyone's favorite scrappy pirate, Hondo Ohnaka. Love him or hate him, Hondo Ohnaka returns in this episode, and honestly, he's sort of what makes this one for me, because this was kind of a fillerish episode, which was very simple. The Ghost Crew finds an Imperial ship with lots of weapon on board, they go on board, they discover they're not the only ones there, they fight off some killer droids, they return to the ship, they get some brand new weapons, they learn a lesson about trusting in the power of friendship and blah 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 blah. Really, this was essentially just a filler episode, but like I said, it was completely saved by Hondo Ohnaka. Maybe we can chalk it up to his voice actor, Jim Cummings, who has not only had a very long and established career, but he just so happens to have one of the most distinctive voices in the entire voice acting community. You have to realize this is the guy who's voiced characters like Tigger and Winnie the Pooh and Darkwing Duck. And now he's playing a classic pirate from the Star Wars universe. And it does come across as goofy at times. I have to admit that the Star Wars Rebels version of Hondo Ohnaka is a little goofier than his younger counterpart from Clone Wars. But he manages to make this episode pretty watchable, not to mention he brings along another classic Star Wars Rebels character as Morgan, who is just as annoying as you remember him. The coolest thing about this episode for me personally is probably the set piece at the very end of the episode when they're actually saving everybody while transporting all of this cargo. One of the coolest elements about the episode, though, is that we get to see these brand new droids, which are these Imperial Sentry droids. Whenever someone tries to break into an Imperial cargo ship and take away all of their cargo, it'll activate these killer droids, which look very similar to the Phase 3 Dark Troopers from Star Wars lore. In fact, when they showed the preview for this season, I actually thought that we were going to be getting Dark Troopers in this series, and unfortunately they really don't even do all that much. They're pretty much your typical battle droid. They just sort of walk mindlessly and blow the crap out of anything in their wake. And to top it all off, most of this episode involved Ezra and Garzeb butting heads. I thought we got over this stuff since the first season of the show. So what's the rundown on this week's episode of Star Wars Rebels? This is probably my least favorite episode of the entire third season, for a number of reasons. One, it's just a very fillerish episode. It's one of those episodes from the series that you can sort of completely skip and you'll be okay. There are some important plot threads though. The fact that they finally get these proton bombs, which is something that they have been looking for a long time, so they finally got those. I also really liked seeing the return of the droid AP5, who is essentially the Alan Rickman droid. That voice actor does a great imitation of that actor, and the fact that he did recently pass away did make this a little bittersweet, but it does make me appreciate that droid because frankly his dry wit is just freaking hilarious. Not to mention Chopper was also really fantastic in this episode right here. But the one thing I did not like about this episode was Zeb and Ezra constantly just fighting with each other. Just, let's get over this crap. Ezra's just really pissed off because he wanted to be in charge of the mission because he decided to bring Hondo on. But of course, they didn't want him to be in charge because their track record with working with this guy pretty much shows that shit is probably going to go wrong. It is pretty satisfying to see Ohnaka actually fail and not get any treasure in this episode. The same thing goes for the character of As Morgan, who, despite the fact that he looks visually striking, doesn't exude as much personality as Hondo Ohnaka. Although I did love the scene when he just sort of feverishly took Ezra's blaster and killed that one Sentry droid, only to realize that that actually made things worse by summoning them from all over the ship. But it's the scenes with Ezra and Zeb that completely annoy me in this episode, because Ezra's just so annoyed that Zeb is in charge, and he's basically just giving him a lot of shit throughout most of the episode, and by the end of it, they just sort of get over it. We just have to accept that there are going to be these mood swings that Ezra is going to go through. He's either going to be incredibly nice and useful, or he's just going to be incredibly snarky and sarcastic. Take it or leave it. Overall, this was a fairly fun episode of Star Wars Rebels, which was high on the laughs, low on the action. That's not to say there wasn't any action. The final part of this episode had a really great set piece when the ghost ship was actually attached to this massive Imperial ship, which was slowly falling in the sky as the other characters are trying to make their way to the ship. It was a really thrilling sequence, something that you expect from like a big Hollywood Star Wars film, and I really liked that a lot. That being said, this was just an okay episode right here. It isn't really bad, but it isn't necessarily great either, so I'm going to give this one right here a 3 out of 5. Check it out, Star Wars Rebels fans. You heard my thoughts about this week's episode. If you did watch it, tell me what you thought about it in the comments section below. Were you excited to see another Hondo Ohnaka episode? Do you think this one's just kind of fillerish? Do you think you should just skip it? Or is this mandatory viewing? And what do you want to see from the rest of Star Wars Rebels? Please tell me in the comment section below. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked it, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and leave me a comment or two. I will see you next time, and as always, stay dandy, baby.